Okay, we're back live here inside theCUBE. This is live in San Francisco. This is theCUBE. We're here in San Francisco for GE's Industrial Cloud event. This is our wrap up. I'm John Furrier, with Dave Vellante and Jeff Kelly. And it's a big announcement by GE talking about their relationship with Pivotal, Amazon, really expanding on the industrial internet, the Internet of Things. Essentially everything's connected from sensors to mobile devices to essentially the industrial, the business internet. And our own Jeff Kelly was on stage with Werner Vogels, the CTO of Amazon, as well as the CEO of Pivotal, Paul Maritz, and Jeff Kelly, the #1 big data analyst, introducing new research. Guys, welcome to the wrap-up. Jeff, congratulations on your awesome presentation of the data. So let's talk about the event. Let's first get into it. You were on stage with those luminaries. And Wikibon.org, Wikibon project introduced some significant research. Again, another groundbreaking report by Wikibon, cutting edge in the emerging sector of industrial engineering. What did you share with folks on the panel, led by Beth Comstock, big time GE executive, and she was moderating the panel that you were a domain expert on. So share with us what you talked about. Sure.
Well, we talked about kind of the development of this new platform to really leverage the industrial internet and some of the requirements that such a platform needs to have. I mean, when we look at the industrial internet and what it's really all about, I mean, there is certainly a scale question. There's the data in the industrial internet sector is growing at twice the speed of other big data sources. But for me, the real story is the potential value of leveraging all that data generated in the industrial internet. So when you talk about the industries that we're talking about here, we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about energy, transportation. These are sectors that touch all manner of society. They cross political boundaries, social, geopolitical. So the idea here is that really the value of bringing together all this data associated with the industrial internet, leveraging that data, analyzing it, optimizing processes, and ultimately allowing companies in these critical industrial sectors to develop new business models, new ways to serve customers and citizens. It really impacts, going to have a much bigger impact on a kind of a relative size percentage, size-wise, than the commercial big data world, if you will. So that's kind of where some of the key findings we had in our research. You had David Floyer on, I think, earlier today, and he talked a little bit more about some of the numbers in terms of the spend. We see this moving to about a $500 billion spend environment in 2020. I think it's going to create somewhere in the order of $1.2 trillion in value. So it's obviously a big opportunity, both for the vendors involved, but also for kind of society at large.
So one of the things that was tweeted about, obviously, the 2x growth of the data versus other sectors was one notable. The other one was this business value. Just elaborate on that seemed to get a lot of great reactions on Twitter and within the audience and among the panelists, this notion of value. Because the value proposition kind of is in the eye of the beholder. I mean,
sure.
Driving some predictive analytics for ads is one thing, but for the example you used was getting medicine to a patient. Expand on the other areas of value that you point to here.
Right. Well, as I said, because of the very nature of the industries involved, the impact of outcomes in those industries are just kind of dwarf in terms of their impact. Kind of just dwarf the value and the importance of some of the activities you'll see in the more commercial side of big data. And that's not to say that some of the things that we're seeing in the commercial side, like retailers looking to understand sentiment analysis in the tweet stream, for instance, or place the next best ad in front of a consumer on the internet. But when you think about the outcomes in healthcare, for example, so think about the consequences of delivering the wrong advertisement to a online web surfer versus the wrong medicine to a critically ill patient, or think about the implications of a jet engine failing mid-flight versus not having a system crash that's supporting a commercial application that sells widgets. So they're both important. They both deliver value, but I think clearly on a societal basis, we can most of us can agree that some of the healthcare, transportation, energy use cases are really going to drive significantly more value and just have a wider impact across society at large.
Dave Vellante, the co-founder and chief analyst at Wikibon, obviously the co-founder of Wikibon. Great to see your research up there being highlighted. What's your take? What's your analysis?
Well, this is big, as we've talked about. In fact, you and I, John, collaborated on a piece when GE made the announcement that's going to invest $105 million into Pivotal. And what was significant about that in the collaboration that we had was, this is the next wave of big data apps, and it was a real differentiator from sort of the traditional Hadoop distributions, and we've always seen that as sort of a commodity. But I will say this: so this huge opportunity. Jeff just talked about half $500 billion TAM. There's a lot of work to be done here, and that's why I think GE's pretty ambitious. I mean, this is big money and it's big challenges. So there's some real headwinds here. There's a real lack of data standards. These have to be developed, and it takes a company like GE and it takes an ecosystem to allow those standards to emerge, and it needs leadership. And GE, we heard from Bill Roos, providing a lot of investment, $1 billion investment over a few years. It's going to be up to, I think, he said 1,000 engineers in its facility out here. So they're putting the investments in, but still, again, a lot of headwinds. The other piece is there's no industrial internet platform. We talk about the industrial cloud, but so you've got sensors that are capturing data, they're processing data locally, they're distributing that data, they're connecting to other networks that will create value, they're providing what I call industrial analytics on top of that. No standards have emerged as to what that platform is, and I think that's what GE and Pivotal are trying to build out with its ecosystem. So it's very early days. And I think the third really challenge here in terms of adoption is engineers that are used to, hey, this works. I don't want to hyper automate it. I'm afraid to hyper automate it. So there's going to have to be a cultural shift as well. And that's why you need a company like GE that is a recognized leader. And I think you need others. There was a question today about, well, what if another big competitor comes out and announces its industrial internet? Well, let's hope they do. And in a way, IBM's Smarter Planet initiative now has really high quality company. I think you'd like to see Hitachi in here doing some similar types of initiatives, and then coagulating some standards around that, because this is an enormous opportunity that can have huge impacts on GDP, improvements in productivity, and improvements in people's lives.
Yeah, Dave, you and I have always talked about the going back to the Wi-Fi wireless days. We saw sensors, and you saw them on wireless devices, and obviously with video surveillance post 9/11, that created essentially Homeland Security. Now we've seen all the dilemma with the NSA and surveillance, but ultimately now with mobile and connected devices on the consumer side, that certainly has shown the business model on the industrial or business side. You're talking heavy machinery, manufacturing, turbines, airplanes, telematics, a lot of automobile conversations in healthcare, et cetera. So the question I want to ask you guys is, that's great. The consumerization has led the trend. Jeff, what are you finding in the data with the technologies? Because still, we're seeing the cloud war still on the consumerization side as well as the IT side. So if it's consumer, IT, and then kind of industrial in that order in terms of adoption, we're still kind of in the middle innings of the just consumer business, never mind, the early innings of the enterprise play. What's your take on the stacks, the tech, and the offerings? Yeah,
we're very much at the beginning of this process. I think the low-hanging fruit, really, I think it's a very easy to understand business proposition when, GE or someone else comes in and says, look, we can help you run your machines more efficiently using this data kind of on a machine-to-machine basis. But then to extend that to a network of machines, whether it's, not just one wind turbine, but all the turbines that make up one wind farm and making those work together. As Dave said, the standards aren't really there to kind of connect all these devices, multiple different types of devices, different types of data. And if you think about the level of orchestration and workflow that needs to go into this, in order to really leverage this, where a machine creates a certain data type, analytics take place, it needs to kick off another series of processes, which then in turn create their own data, which need to be analyzed, then kick off more processes. So these all need to be connected. They have to be intelligent. So we're looking at things like machine learning, open and hopefully commonly accepted standards to improve communication and networking of these devices. Applications that actually deliver on value in terms of business value, in terms of real use cases. So there's a long way to go. Certainly, I think GE understands this. GE is in an interesting position because they're coming at this from the machine perspective. They are the industrial equipment manufacturer maker. So they're coming at it from the machine perspective. You look at somebody like IBM, they're coming at it from the software perspective. So I think it's, on GE's part, a really smart move to partner with someone like Pivotal. They recognized that they were going to need the help of smart people like Paul Moritz and Scott Yard to help build this new platform of the future, and they're really going to try to leverage this platform to serve across all their lines of business.
So Dave, I want to get to you in this wrap up, because this is where we kind of have to play your, you said about horses for courses. The races aren't even being run yet, so they don't even know what kind of horses they need to run on whatever course it is. So the message of open seems to be GE's take. So is that a good play for them? Obviously, it gives them a little bit of an option to play whatever that comes down the track for them.
Yeah, well, John, I was going to say and ask. Wanted to have you weigh in here, because one of the things I'm personally excited about is the degree to which open source is really now finding its way into virtually every technology business. Now the latest is in industrial internet. So John, I mean, you are one of the most biggest proponents of open source that I've met. I mean, what's your take on this?
Well, I think first of all, I love the Internet of Things. I've always been fascinated since 2001, really, when wireless hit the scene. It was pretty obvious that this vision was going to take place. When and where, and to what the platforms would be the question. I think now, to me, this industrial Internet, this industrial cloud, I think it's just kind of pre-packaging of what will happen. And I don't think there's a name for that yet. And I'll give you an example. To me, in 1993, the word was information superhighway. That basically described the internet. And then Tim Berners-Lee started the web, HTTP protocol, and HTML became the web, and the web became what we all used. So back then, that was the word. So to me, this feels a lot like the information superhighway, sounding a really killer sounding word. It's impressive, but ultimately that's not what became the reality in the marketplace. And I think that's something that I'm seeing. Also with open source, you're going to see things like OpenStack and the cloud wars continue to expand. I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to SLAs, who can deliver, because I don't want my airplane turbine data going across, ops are down, plane's not functioning. So you need real time, you need really high-end ops. And I think that's going to be a challenge. I think it's going to be very early.
What did Ed Dubbill call it on theCUBE? The data superhighway.
Yeah, the data superhighway. And I think he's right, breaking down the silos. But at the end of the day, data is like what packets were. So like to me, another metaphor we brought up earlier was the local area networking days, the internetworking. TCP/IP, as you remember, Dave, we were in the industry then, enabled massive wealth creation. 3Com, Cisco, those companies were born out of that new standard. So to me, I think your question about open source is the issue. There are no more standards bodies anymore, in my opinion. It's all about the communities. Open source communities are the new standards bodies, and that is where things will get ratified. And I think from there, you'll see the market really lift. And then as people get direction, the fog will lift around where it goes. But ultimately, that is going to be the telltale sign, is what happens in open source, what happens in cloud, and what happens at the edge of the network. That's mobile, that's probe. So software at the edge, that's data, and data will be the packet. So event management, processing, event streams, these are the tech. These are metaphors we've seen with network management, and again, networking. So I think networking is going to be a kind of paradigm we'll see. Instead of packets, it's data, and the stack instead of TCP/IP is going to be some sort of interoperable fashion.
And there's a lot of propriety in the machines that are installed. The GE sells, and EMC's never really been a big producer of open source technologies, but that's the beauty of open source. I mean, you saw IBM turn on a dime. Lou Gerstner called it a recovering alcoholic, and they became a huge proponent of open source, and that I think is the beauty of this model. And then I guess the other observation is you got companies like GE, obviously a lot bigger than EMC, but both of them, it's the old Jack Welch, you want to be number one and number two in your markets, and you want to focus on markets that are large and growing fast, and that's something that I know personally from watching EMC all these years that they've done very, very well. Clearly, GE is going after a next wave of value creation for its shareholders and its customers, and so those are two very exciting trends that, as I say, a lot of challenges, but challenges mean you need big companies with a lot of resources to solve them, and the end result potentially is a lot of reward.
Well, that's the wrap up. Any final thoughts, Jeff? I see you sitting next to some pretty big names up there. Paul Moritz, did you get him on, put a CUBE plug in there?
Well, we did our best, yeah.
Paul Moritz, you have to come on the CUBE, waiting for you.
Well, we've got a spot for you, Paul, whenever you're ready.
The other fascinating thing that I found out, this was Leo, who does the M&A for Pivotal, laid out in the CUBE here, Dave, which is fascinating because we've been watching the inside baseball on VMware EMC for years, and to have him kind of give us some insight into a lot of the Pivotal gaming that went on around how to organize, you say misfit toys, but the different components of VMware, which weren't materializing very well under the old regime of VMware. VMware was too big of an organization, had too much legacy going on at the data fabric layer, and obviously vSphere and among other things with virtualization. That was just too much for Pivotal really to get any kind of traction. And to me, it was just they didn't have enough runway.
Yeah, and EMC was a storage stovepipe essentially, and so now they've extracted those and boom, put them into this hot new entity.
So
it's a great move.
My prediction is that you're going to see the architecture of what what Leo put together with Joe Tucci, Goulden, and Gelsinger. And Maritz is essentially an organization that's decoupled, okay, and highly cohesive. So you're going to see some great interaction. You're going to see Pivotal probably expand heavily. I think Pivotal's going to have a nice run. I think got all the elements. They got a lot more work to do in the white spaces, which he didn't really answer the white space question, but I think clearly they're going to be going on an M&A spree.
I think for Pivotal, it'll be interesting to see how they develop because they have taken some heat in the Hadoop and open source community for taking a bit of a proprietary approach with Pivotal HD. And so we're here at the G event talking about being open and open standards and things like that. So
well, they use open standards, but for their solution, it's proprietary. So again, this is going to be the question that we've always asked in theCUBE, will there be a Red Hat for Hadoop? And I think the answer is slowly becoming the only Red Hat of Hadoop will be Red Hat, which will buy Hortonworks, possibly, or somebody else. So the only Red Hat of Hadoop will be whoever they buy.
Red Hat.
And then Red Hat will be the Red Hat of Hadoop, and they'll have their own distribution. But
the answer was staring us in the face the whole time.
I think the Hadoop distribution is a standard, but you can sit on top of it. So we're seeing some emerging paradigms there.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's security or whether it's API management, that's going to be something we're going to watch.
Well,
so
and I do think, to your point, that Pivotal will have to become, more of a contributor to the open source community. I think it's going to become a fundamental requirement over the next 5 years, and frankly, I think they will. I think the market will drive them. EMC, VMware, they're very market driven. So, maybe they don't have to be the purest of Hortonworks, but
well, right, no one's not suggesting they need to be purists, but one of the key questions about this business is where do you add the IP and how do you monetize it? Open to proprietary. I mean, that's the equation that all these vendors need to figure out, and they're all kind of taking different approaches.
Right, but services is one way, but it's not the only way.
Right.
It's a good way. I love services.
Well, I mean, Dave points it out. I mean, many times on theCUBE, he asked the guests today, it's the service provider, the technology providers or solution providers going to provide, for every dollar they sell, the practitioners will be getting a multiple of that in either delivery or value. So, I think to me that's pretty clear that's going to be the edge of the network. It's going to be app developers. That's going to be the in-between Accenture. I mean, I see Accenture, essentially prototyping Accenture and giving that out to the channel. So I think Accenture's strategy is pretty relevant. I mean, I like what they're doing. Instead of trying to be the guys to do it all for everybody, they can prefabricate this middle layer, orchestration layer, and provide that on. So I think that's where the action is going to end up going. And if Pivotal can pull it off, that's where the developers will really make money.
Well, and so you mentioned Accenture. IBM's obviously got the Smarter Planet, tons of services there. Look for Deloitte and PwC to get into this game. I think they're logical partners of GE because there's huge opportunities and they have deep industry expertise as well. And those four are really the top ones. IBM, PwC, Deloitte, and Accenture, the top four in IT, and I think you'll see them all doing stuff in this space.
Right. Well, let's not forget, look at it from the machine perspective. You've got GE's competitors like United Technologies, Siemens, that whole
Hitachi,
right? So they're not gonna sit back and just let GE take this market. So you're gonna see this is gonna be the next wave of activity. It's gonna be among these players, the ones you mentioned on the software and services side. It's gonna be on the industrial equipment maker side. You're gonna see a lot of strange alliances potentially, and it's gonna be really interesting to see how this plays out.
Okay, this is theCUBE, SiliconANGLE's here on the ground in San Francisco, documenting and covering the emerging space of the Internet of Things, the Internet of Everything, industrial internet, industrial cloud, whatever you want to call it. Beth Comstock was on stage with GE with their executives. You had Paul Maritz, Werner Vogels, Accenture, and Wikibon all on stage leading this trend, and those are the companies that are going to start taking us into this emerging space. So great event. Go to the hashtag industrial cloud to follow all the coverage. We have tweets, we have content. Of course, go to wikibon.org for their recent report on this. It is cutting edge, and obviously go to SiliconANGLE for all the coverage. This is a wrap up here in San Francisco, and we'll be at the Velocity conference starting tomorrow, so keep watching theCUBE. A lot more events happening at the end of the year, and thanks for watching.